hello, all you positive heads out there. It's so good to be back with all you beautiful reflections of the one source consciousness that creates and animates all things. If you're new to this podcast, of course, we are super happy to have you here, and we just ask that you bring an open mind and heart to your listening experience and to be prepared to explore vantage points that I'm convinced will help shift or solidify your current understanding of the ultimate nature of reality. While listening, you'll be exposed to inspiring, empowering, and unifying perspectives that I'm highly confident will yield stellar results in your life if you opt to try them on for size. Also, at optimistic.tv, we have officially begun releasing the first few episodes of our new late-night style, consciousness-elevating video variety talk show, Optimistic, which features live visionary art, soul share interviews, retreat guests here at the Mystic Manor, as well as live musical performances. I'm also super excited to announce that we are currently making plans to release the rest of Season 1 on my personal favorite online streaming service. So stay tuned to optimistic.tv to follow the unfolding development of this exciting Optimistic expansion, as we'll be posting more info and release dates there soon. And in the meantime, be sure to check out, of course, the first few episodes at optimistic.tv as well. All right, all you positive heads. On this week's Soul Share episode, I'm very excited to have my good friend Julian Guderley here with me on the show. I was actually on his podcast recently, Green Planet, Blue Planet, and today we're going to switch microphones up here. We're going to dive into some of the things that we are actually both passionate about discussing, such as Earth vision and the technology of the body. Hello, Julian. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Hey, Brandon. This is a great feeling to be here with you and all the positive heads starting out this episode. Good to switch mics and be in your show.
Yeah. We've been talking about doing this for a very long time, so I am glad the time has arrived.
The time is always now, exactly. Yeah, we've been
in
anticipation. You know, when you meet someone and you kind of feel in the interbeing or in the space of synchronicity between the person that there's something coming up, or you know you'll meet them again, or you know you want to co-create something with them. And so what I find curious with happened with you actually and a few podcasters, when you see so clearly the other person is also on their mission of weaving interviews, sense making, curiosity, asking questions. You know, it's almost like you're tapping into something that's in the interbeing of the two of us meeting. So I'm stoked to follow up with this wonderful interview.
Yeah. I had someone on, I don't know, maybe a year and a half ago, I would guess, something like that. And right before we started, he goes, hold on one second. Let me do a little clearing here. You and I have. So yeah, he's just saying, you know, we had some past life related stuff. And he's like, oh, and by the way, as I tap in here, about 20% of the people that you have on to do interviews with, you have significant past life, you know, interactions with. And, you know, who knows if it's true or not, but it's a very interesting thing to think about when you meet someone, whether there's past history or future history. I feel like both are equal as potentials to be felt, right? So it's that idea of like, wow, why does this person seem so familiar to me? Or I always equate it to walking into class when you back in high school or, junior high, whatever, and someone's really jumps out at you, like you feel really drawn to them or interested in them, intrigued by them. And then by the end of the year, they're your like best friend or whatever. So it's one of those things where I think it's when you have work to do with someone and when there's some either past or future history, a lot of times it's just felt.
Past or future history, I like that. Yeah. And so you see, that's in my experience. Sometimes it's exactly as you said. It's like you're almost startled when you meet someone. Like, have I met this person again?
Well, right.
Wait a second. Why am I here right now? Like, what made me turn on this podcast? What made me, hop on this conversation? And so for me, in those moments, it's often about slowing down, ideally slowing down the narrator voice as well, to just immerse into the experience of them, because there are a lot of gold nuggets of synchronicity to be found.
For sure. Well, let's start with the same predictable question. My listeners know what's coming. I like to start with, and it's this. You're in an elevator. The woman next to you looks over and says, "What's your passion?" You have 10 floors to answer. What do you say?
What's my passion? My passion is to steward planet Earth into a beautiful, thriving future that, works for all humankind, and especially sets us up for success from the beginning. And so I think, I have 10 floors. We'd have to redefine success to go deeper into this conversation.
So you don't want to put billions of dollars in your bank account that you leave sitting there rotting after you're gone?
No, I'm not necessarily planning on having billions of dollars in the bank account. That's totally true. I feel like the billions of dollars or trillions of dollars, they're like a token of omnipresence, just like the color green when you go into the forest, or like the amount of leaves that there are on any given trees. Like it goes towards infinity, right? Or it goes towards abundance. And so, no, I think they're just a tool, like a means to an end to either create ultra wealth the way the world is working right now, or, much more sensible, I guess, at this point in 2020, we can clearly see that like what the world really needs is a form of wealth that allows everyone to have access to what I think we used to call human rights, what are just like basic needs and necessities, like shelter, water, living, etc. And so, like, obviously, I acknowledge my privilege to be here and share about this on a podcast and having seen this around the world. But really, I think that's what my passion is, man. My passion is to awaken in this process of life every day, and every day making new choices that allow me to thrive or grow as either the consciousness I am or the person I am, however you see the world, I guess, And the reason why this is such a clear passion for me, I guess, is because I've simply made this choice. It's a commitment. I make it every day. I make it again and again, even when things are difficult, because it is just so truly it's the only thing that like lights me up to the amount of joy that is, it's almost like in a higher resonance. That amount of joy, no short-term pattern or addiction or dopamine or reflection or attraction, nothing else can give me that like resonance of joy than this passion of understanding. We're alive to wake up. We're alive to be planet Earth together. We're alive to be humans on planet Earth together. We're alive to coming through possibly a gateway of inhumane times. If we look back, like, right. If you go with me here for a second, Brandon, along the timeline, if we were to go back 200 years or even just 100 years, right? Like World War I, think of that. Like people would probably think that was still such a different time on Earth for our consciousness. We look back and we don't even associate with the same kind of separation anymore today. But what about 100 years in the future? Right. Don't you think those people will look back on us and be like, well, I mean, they figured things out.
Yes.
But really, like, I think when we look back on these times, we're coming out of like dark ages of like advanced modern slavery and advanced modern mind control. And on the other side of that is where passion is, where life is, where a life affirming kind of paradigm wait. And so, dude, for me, that's what's turned into my passion, because it's the only thing that gives me a consistent boost of joy, motivation, and determination.
Yeah. It's and I joked about, like, you sort of said what your passion is, and I instantly think of so many people whose passion has been just to like accumulate wealth and then sort of tuck it away under the mattress and not do anything to help heal the planet. And of course, there are people that are doing that very thing, and it's great. I think we'll see more and more, but I think that's a big part of what needs to happen is, spreading it around. It's crazy when you think about how much wealth is sort of sitting there stagnant, and meanwhile there's children that will die as we're having this conversation because of malnutrition or, not having access to, clean water or whatever it is. And it's just one of those things. I think in 100 years, even we'll look back and be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that we actually were that, embedded in the perspective of separation, that we allowed these things to happen when there's plenty to go around. It's kind of like, it really equates to sitting on imagine if like 20 of us were stranded on an island and then there's plenty of food there, right?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, one of us takes charge and figures out a way to harvest all the food, and that's really clever,
You have to
and
start
then
paying
puts it
me to
all
get
in,
food.
and then they're in their hut, and then it's like, oh yeah, sorry, this is all mine. I've got 84,000 pounds of bananas, and I'm going to watch your children die, across the island. It's like, it's wild to think about.
That would be wild to think about. But if you think of homelessness in the modern context and like 100 years into the future, and you look back, it's like, well, wait a second. You guys had enough housing. You had empty spaces. You had idle empty spaces that, were paid off. So why exactly did you do it the way you did it? And so I think for a lot of us, like looking back, we always look back into the past being like, oh, those are these people in black and white on our movie and TV screens that didn't quite know how to do 1 + 1 = 2. But what if 1 + 1 = 11, and it's actually meant to be an abundant kind of exponential formula.
It's almost greater than the equal parts.
Exactly, and 1 + 1 + 1 then equals 111, right? Because even when we look back to 1914, 15, 16, and I made this example like deliberately. Recently, there was this "They Shall Not Grow Old." This new movie came out that they post-processed footage from the First World War into color, so it's high definition and color, and we can now see these people that used to be black and white in our memory. We can now see them in color and high definition, like they were to stand next to us or were in our memory from yesterday. And so just like the people in 1916, 17, 18, Brandon, didn't think that the people in 2020 will be able to see them in color, in high definition. What are we not able to see? Like, what's in our collective blind spot, I guess, that when we have a positive hat, when we are optimistic, when we can choose to look at the direction we actually want to attract and create, what are the things we can learn from the past? And what are the things that are so obvious, like homelessness or trash and garbage and pollution, that is just a pretty simple equation, actually, right?
Right. Well, I'd love, Julian, to hear a little bit about your backstory. I know the listeners would love to just get some context for, where you've come from and how you ended up on this path.
Yeah, I think what's interesting to say there is the where we just kind of started to ramble into the topic of Earth vision and like being a planetary citizen or planetary steward. And, for me, it all started in the way I grew up and the way I traveled the world, that's for sure. But really, it's also what led me to sense make this all through a podcast and over 200 episodes and counting of just interviewing people just like yourself, to weave a community of people that has, it's not about silos of opinions, but similar visionary ambition that then doesn't turn into ambition, but just a logical consequence, right? And so where that started out for me, I think I want to go back all the way to when I first went abroad. So when I was a teenager, I had this like deep inner spirit sensation that back then was just a notion. I wanted to go abroad. I grew up in Germany in like a beautiful, privileged, you would call it upper middle class kind of environment next to the forest. All my friends lived in walking distance, right? We played outside every day. And then one day I was like, I want to go see the world. And I was 14 and my parents and my mom were, quite scared. And I had to realize for the first time, okay, other people can be scared for me and that I will feel that. But I had this drive in me, and I went to see the world. I was 15. I went to Paraguay, and this is really where it started. I started seeing the world with my own eyes. I experienced it. I learned Spanish. I learned Portuguese. I lived there for a full year before I was even 16, and so when I came back from a year in Paraguay, for those who've heard me share this before, I'll cut that short. What really happened is I had a cultural shock coming back to my home culture. And that was a really odd experience. It's almost like you go somewhere else, things are done differently there. And then when you come back home, what do you see? What do you reflect over? What do you awaken to? What are you now conscious that you're seeing that you couldn't see before? And so that process started kind of like winding open all of the conditioning that was placed on me. And I started remembering more and more about, what really this journey is about. And it took another few years and another few, experiences of living abroad, being abroad, been to over 60 countries at this point and lived in a few of them. It led me to Canada. And, in Canada, there's a lot more space than there's, let's say, in Central Europe. And so in my journey of going west and coming to arrive on Vancouver Island, I really started to embrace, what for me is like, I'd call myself an adventurer in that sense. Like I'm a fuck yes person. I say fuck yes to something, or I say thanks, that's not for me. Like I just know, in my solar plexus, in my emotional authority, I just know what feels right, and when it feels right, I do it. And I learned that about myself really early, and so with all these different perspectives, different places like Paraguay, I lived in Italy in between, and then Canada, I started understanding, okay, what am I really observing here? What am I really doing here beyond like living this adventurous life and looking great, having fun, which is an important part to it, because we know being positive and having this attitude actually perpetuates that kind of reality. But at the same time, it was really important for me to take a step back. And in Canada, what I did, and this is maybe an interesting context to the modern times we're in and the regenerative kind of movement that's forming through so many, like hubs and groups like podcasts and innovation labs, etc. I started opening a space actually in Canada that I would call like an open space, or like a yoga mindfulness space. But really, we did all kinds of things. We had meditations, classes, art classes, nutrition classes, to really get the community to activate their collective potential. And so maybe I'll put a comma there and pass it back to you, Brendan, because this is what started to show up on my path from going abroad as a young teenager, learning a bunch of languages, understanding that you can like quantum jump into skills almost, right? If you just want and commit hard enough. But then also realizing that what really matters is, what is the community you're living in? What are they cultivating? Because you will be an effect of your community. Even if you have a lot of control through money or power, you will still be a direct reflection of your community that you live in. And so that's also how we met, right, Brandon? We met in Costa Rica
Yeah.
a few years ago, and maybe that's also why there's such a strong tie to follow up with an episode even years later, because we can sense that there is a power in this community, in these few hundred people that are living out there, creating their own mastery and learning how to create their own mastery.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a great example. That trip to Costa Rica, the amount of people who are important parts of my life now, it's been one of the most impactful, you know, uh, trips and adventures in community that I've ever had. And so it's definitely, the future is all about coming together more and more and finding your tribe, I think, and then how your tribe helps to benefit other people, other tribes, and they're all connected ultimately. But
Exactly.
that which is likened to itself is drawn, and so it's a really interesting time to see who and what pops up as we continue to do the work ourselves and continue to, reach for the next greatest and greatest version of ourselves. Who then shows up in our movie, if you will, as a new reflection.
Yeah, and like let me unpack that a little bit, because I have some really great examples in how that plays out across the world, or has played out for me. Like, you know that's why I mentioned the example of Paraguay, Canada, Germany, where I grew up, and a few other countries I've been to in Asia as well. They were so different, at the first impression. But then ultimately, what
Yeah.
you start observing is that the social dynamics within groups of people, between a few hundred, or with a podcast from a few thousand to a few million people, we spread information as humans, and that information helps us to like adapt our lifestyle. But then as microcosms and small groups, we all have a lot of things in common, and we don't
Yeah.
all need to agree with each other, as long as we can respect each other's values and have some kind of coherent experience around trust and transparency, right?
Mm.
And for me, for example, it's always interesting coming into new groups where at the beginning there's a lot of space for projection, unless everyone is in their full presence and has done all their self work, right? Like you're the German kid who arrives in the Paraguayan school, or you're the immigration story that is now new to Canada, or and those were my cases. But I think people can relate in their own
Right.
experiences. When you start something new, you enter into a space of interacting with new tribes or new people, and so in that sense, it's like you're starting to seed your own global community, and you're starting to weave who are you really, because I said that a little earlier, like we can only be our full self based on how others see us show up. And as we show up, as we open those doors, as we are those bridges of interculturally or interpersonally, or a bridge of higher consciousness, or a bridge of love and devotion, I think what starts to happen to people is, as we're recognizing our tribe, the people around us, and our roles in the tribe, we start to experience a complete new level of fulfillment, like a level of devotional existence. And so that's really only possible in community. I think, if I think of living alone on a mountaintop or in a cave, I'm not sure if there's going to be the same kind of joyful, ecstatic devotion that can be cultivated in community. And so, in other words, that's what I really think we're on this planet for, Brandon. I think we came here to see planet Earth and humanity transition from times of deception and times of, darkness, or times of inhumane age, into an era where the world does work for everyone. It will work really differently for everyone, and it already is, right? It's everyone lives in a shared reality and a parallel reality at the same time.
Right. Yeah, I think that's an important point, is that you are in your own private movie to one degree from one perspective, and from another perspective, it's very much shared with others. And these relative truths, it sort of depends on what vantage point you're looking for, and both are real, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give you an example that recently happened to me. I know you like to ask about synchronicities, and so, I was I came out. I was teaching. I was invited to teach in Bolivia at a science club, youth academy, and from that place, I was kind of without a plan. But my beloved and I, we were committed to going to Davos in Switzerland, and so, without knowing a lot, we rented a place half an hour outside of Davos, rented a car, and then just, connected with our community there. And as we were in Switzerland, one of our friends, who also happens to be, has happened to be on my podcast, her name is Anna Naturalista, and also was a mentor of my partner for a long time. She ended up staying with us because our place was big enough. And unfortunately, second day, she started to have a cold, and the cold turned into like a full-blown fever, and something that like rarely happened to her, and she had to stay at home. And as we're leaving in the morning, she's like, "Hey guys, I need to just sleep this off, stay in the sunshine for a bit, do some breath work." She asks me, "Can you actually host a meditation later tonight at this big meeting?" I was supposed to host a meditation and a cacao ceremony. And, I host breathwork everywhere I go at this point on the planet, because I realize breathwork is one of the easiest way across languages and barriers for people to have a somatic experience of becoming present, giving space to their amygdala, giving space to their nervous system. And so I was a little hesitant, but I was like, well, that's a kind of a cool fit, bringing some of the gifts I learned around the world back to, closer to home in Switzerland, and Germany are our neighbors after all. And going on with my day, feeling like more and more confident about it, venturing out to buy like the organic cacao, etc. And then ultimately I hosted this beautiful breathwork and meditation, opened a ceremony around cacao before another friend started a 2030 party, remembering the future as we were collectively gathering.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so we were like celebrating 2030, and had person after person come on stage celebrating the look back onto the year 2020, when we were actually meeting, from the perspective of having achieved all the global goals. And like cool. Rick Doblin from Maps was there talking about how the specific dates when psychedelics were legalized, and new charters and legislations. And another person I found really interesting, an astronaut who was just in space, actually for 6 months on the ISS, spoke more about his perspective of the pale blue dot. And it was just an amazing evening, and I got to kick it off with a breathwork and a cacao ceremony. And here's a long story short: the synchronicity, I didn't know this. There was about 100, maybe max 150 people in the room at Block Base in Davos for someone who was there. And like a month later, I'm back in Costa Rica, en route to someone that I only met once before, who invited us to join a beautiful gathering and host more kind of insights, teachings, and meditations there. And it turns out, Brandon, that this guy, my friend, at this point, we're collaborating in multiple projects, Pablo Jenkins, watched me in Davos host this breath work that I wasn't planning to host, that I was just following because someone else had to, basically couldn't do it because of the physical condition. And so I stepped in, and with stepping in and just trusting myself and just celebrating it for the evening, a month later, that came full circle. And I met a person who watched me and made a mental note during this meditation, during this breath work, to say, I want to connect with this Julian guy. I want to understand what he's teaching, what he's offering. And long story short, here I am on one of his the properties he has access to in Costa Rica, and masterminding with a group of 10 people, how we're going into these new times, because it's really cosmically a very new decade we're going into. And I found it just so fascinating. That's why I wanted to share it. Like, when we follow this inner guidance and we follow this curiosity, and we can just say yes and jump into cold water within less than 8 hours between her asking me and me offering it. That's when, it sounds maybe slow because it happened over months, but really this were all just really unique present moments. And I'm still experiencing some of the ripples of impact because we're currently relaunching and reworking on a lot of the branding around Green Planet, Blue Planet podcast, possibly also going live with a Patreon in the next month. Cool. And a few of my breath work and meditation and mindfulness practices that I offer and teachings that I have.
I love this story because it reminds me of conversation that I had on Optimistic with Lee Harris. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Lee Harris.
The energy updates.
Yeah, exactly. Lee's amazing. You guys, if you check it out, optimistic.tv, you can see the latest episode with Lee. And in that interview, he was talking about this very thing, how a lot of times there will be a retraction before something will come up that he's supposed to do or that's kind of thrust on him. And there will sort of be a retraction to wanting to do it. He even used being on Optimistic that day. He's like, okay, I knew it was the day we were going to, I had to get out of my very cozy sort of mentality of, not wanting to really go out and do much, and I'm going to go and be on a TV show, right? And so all right, I've got to motivate, I've got to drive an hour, I've got to prepare and all those things. And so he just was talking about how he's learned to recognize when there's a retraction before something, especially if something that seems like it could be an opportunity that's just thrust on us sort of last minute in your case, right? That a lot of times he's now realized that means there's a great experience waiting there, on the other side of it. Or I also think of
observation. Such a beautiful observation.
Isn't it? It reminds me of also, now I'm thinking about it as well, my friend, Craig, who's hosted ayahuasca journeys for 25 years, and he talking about how a lot of times there'll be that retraction before they actually, it's time. Their ego will even I got to get out of this. I'm not feeling well. And it's because they're sort of resisting that. It's sort of the retraction before the expansion in a way. And so if you can be aware of that, and especially when there's a circumstance like yours, like here's this person just in their name, Naturalista, sounds like someone who's not really fond of getting sick or choosing that reality very often, right? And experiencing that very often. Yeah. And so all of a sudden, here's this thing that seems kind of odd and off and weird and inexplicable.
It totally felt unexpected. And the funny thing, as you're mentioning these examples from Lee Harris and your friend Craig, I think I remember correctly that, I was already feeling the yes. I was feeling it. But then when my mind went there, I was like, oh, wow, it's 2 p.m. in the afternoon. This all goes down at 8 p.m. No one has purchased cacao yet. And basically it's landing on my lap to now go out and venture and find organically grown cacao in the ski resort town of Davos. Well, fuck.
Right.
I needed to go to 3 or 4 stores. I speak German, so I could ask for help, but they just didn't have it in some of the stores. They just had this Swiss, beautifully manufactured chocolate with sugar in it. And so I turned into this whole odyssey, man. But that was really I think that was really the part that made it worth it. Because that was the time when it's the universe, hey, do you realize, are you ready to show up for what you're asking for? Are you ready to show up for what you're asking for, right? It's such a clear ripple or retraction. Are you ready to leave the cozy zone for a bit? Are you ready to stay clear and crisp until 8 p.m. and then host and guide other people? Are you willing to not go to 2 or 3 meetings that will maybe, this is what happens in Davos. When you go to the meetings, they don't drain you necessarily, but like it's a lot of energy. And so are you maybe willing to say no to some meetings, go venture, get the cacao, and share your energy with a group of people? And so I was processing all that in real time rather slowly, while afterwards it's an amazing story. And what happens is sometimes, and this is why I chose this specific story, you don't even need to know. You don't even need to know who's watching you. You don't even need to know who's listening. You don't even need to know how many people there are. As long as you're following that strong kind of mix of being of service from that notion of purpose, it's like where your most inner passion, I remember earlier you asked me, and it's like the planet and our story as humanity itself, where that meets the reality, where that meets the demand of our current society, right? Like in my case, something new I'm involved with is just a lot of men's work in the last 2 years, and a lot of learning programs, because this is where my passion of turning this paradigm on Earth into a thriving kind of foundation with all the other epic human beings that are on this planet, that passion most easily meets reality in learning programs, education, teachings, broadcasting, videos, right? Because this is where we're all meeting. This is where we're all meeting to upgrade. We're all going to YouTube to learn, I don't know, how to play the guitar in 7 days, or how to learn 100 words of German to have some basic conversational skill. And so that, I think, is the full circle. When you trust that service and you trust that, that effortless kind of invitation. For those who are familiar with the human design, I'm a projector as well. So that invitation is always the sign. The spirals of manifestation are beginning.
Right. Yeah, that's a great way to look at it. It's when you're saying yes, you are opening up so many new potentialities. And
that's it, man. And that's a lifestyle, right? Like you're saying yes to the version of you that you're actually holding in your dream template. So there's not like a higher vibing version of you that you have in your mind's eye that you don't share with people, that you're secretly hoping for, you being seen as the superhero. But actually what it is you're consistently leaning into embodying this to the fullest degree. And whatever practice, this is how breathwork ended up in my practice 10 years ago. And yoga, it just started to appear, and I started tracking and noticing and, mapping my flow states, that on the days that I did an oxygen practice, on the days that I stretched my body, on the days that I even, go for runs or go for a cold shower, I have more consistent positive experiences and positive memories. And so it's a logical consequence almost when you do a lot of the right steps. But also we're not machines, right? We're free beings, and sometimes it's just important to stumble into a beautiful sunny experience as much as it is to be really on it and really prepare the vessel, prepare the vehicle, prepare the mind, connect those neurons, and then go out and meet the world.
Before we continue on with today's episode, I'd like to take a few minutes to share 2 exciting new ways we can co-create and grow together. It's actually going to take about 3 minutes to explain, so if you'd like to skip ahead, now's your chance. One of the ways, for the first time ever, I'm going to be offering a few select slots for life activation sessions where I go deep with a few select people one-on-one to explore how we can put our heads together to upgrade you to the next greatest and grandest version of yourself. Now, I don't claim to have all the answers, but I have gotten pretty good at manifesting magic in my own life. And I feel strongly that I can help you do the same in your own life if you are truly committed to working with me and following my lead to help you get there. Honestly, this is not something I see myself doing for years to come. So if you want to take advantage of this window to work with me directly and discuss the possibilities of having one-on-one weekly sessions with me, head over to positivehead.com/upgrade and fill out the short form to set up a free life activation exploration call with me to discuss the possibilities. The other way is you can now grow and play alongside me and a plethora of other holistic healers, powerful coaches, and wonderful workshop facilitators via the new virtual community we have created over at optimistic.tv. Unlike the in-person retreats we've hosted over the last year here at the Mystic Manor, our new online retreat membership program is super accessible to each and every one of you from both a physical location and a cost perspective standpoint. We actually allow you to join for free and then pay what you can for our online retreat membership program, which conveniently connects you from the comfort of your home online via Zoom with our PlayShop facilitators, as well as the other PlayShop attendees from all over the world. Our online retreat playshops are available to you twice a day, 7 days a week. And we let you pay what you can because we don't want money to get in the way of you co-creating with us. Our ever-expanding stellar offerings include live-streamed playshops on Zoom, such as authentic relating, guided meditations, breathwork, with influencer Q&As, soul expression, sensual awakening, tarot, magic movement, sound healing, and much, much more. And we're going to be constantly collaborating with new healers and facilitators so that you continue to regularly get fresh PlayShop offerings, many of who are SoulShare guests on this podcast. So if you want to deepen your transformational journey with us beyond this podcast, just head over to optimistic.tv to sign up and pay what you can to join in all the PlayShop magic with us. It's even free right out of the gate. And otherwise, see you soon on Zoom here at the Mystic Manor. Here we grow. Yeah, I've been doing breathwork more than ever this year, and I've definitely noticed that same thing. I went actually several weeks without doing a lot of breathwork or meditation, or I'd been working so much, and I actually did all the things you just named. Just a couple of days ago, I went out, I ran, I did breath work, I did yoga, I meditated in the park, I then swam, and I came back and I'm like, oh my gosh, why am I not doing this every day? Because I've noticed such a difference in every aspect of my being. And then, yeah, there are days where you're just like not feeling it, but learning to really lean into that stuff. And it's gotten easier because, here at the Mystic Manor, we're doing play shops twice a day, as we call them, instead of workshops, play shops. And one of them is breath work, where, we'll do one in the morning and one in the evening and different things. And we're actually going to be pulling in a lot of people, friends, and other healers and coaches and things like that, just to continue to offer, different, perspectives and different teachers and different guides. And so that might be something cool to bring you into even one time in the coming weeks.
There's a lot more breath work being offered right now in my cosmos. Yeah. Didn't want to interrupt you though.
Yeah. So why don't you share a little bit about what your experience, I found it to be super simple and super powerful, and, what it is that most appeals to you when it comes to, breath work and the technology of the body and how it changes our body, et cetera.
Yeah, Brandon, thanks for that invitation and question around breathwork. I think, first of all, it's just a personal experience. And, a lot of the things when I coach and what I teach, often I say that in the very beginning, like, don't take everything I say as a literal instruction. It's much more a metaphorical guideline to then put into a reality practice, because reality is what you make the experience to be. It's what you creatively express. It's how you interact with your body, with your world, with the people around you. It's not what somebody else tells you. And so breath work for me is the easiest bridge to that place. It gets you into your own body, into your own experience, into your own thought construct. It kind of cuts through the thoughts almost, right? If you especially do holotropic or over-oxygenating. And so I've created a fusion of a few different breathwork modalities over the last 2 years. I've taught yoga and meditation for years, but, through Hatha yoga, ultimately Kundalini yoga, a lot of Kriya yoga that is the foundation of Kundalini yoga, and holotropic breathwork like Wim Hof and other kind of, more like shamanic Amazonian breathwork styles that are really invigorating and healing and deep rebirthing. That's all the different places I've learned from and taken from. And what I love to offer to people is this, like, going into a deep state, going straight from, if people are familiar with our brain waves, going straight from where we're talking right now in beta frequency below alpha, which is like the initiation of meditation, into theta state simply through breath and over oxygenating for like a minute or two, in quite a yang or vigorous way. And then after that, expanding the breath, right? Because we know a lot of what we love about life, a lot of the goals we have, a lot of the peak performance expressions or the dreams we have, they happen in an expansive state. They happen when we leave our comfort zone. They happen when we match our skills and our strength with a form of genius, with a form of unpredicted. And so at that edge, living at that edge, I think takes many, many different forms. It can take the form of learning a new skill. It can take the form of breathing into that edge consciously, or it can take the form of singing, which I think is ultimately the highest expression of that kind of practice. And so you mentioned it earlier, Brandon, it's a technology. It's a technology to resonate the body into a frequency that you can set, right? So if you're following this, if you are familiar with the Hermetic principles and the idea of polarity, for example, and that polarity keeps swinging, but you can remove yourself into neutrality, you can also set yourself into a space or a vibration that is simply what you're emanating, who you are, like as if you are a frequency tuner and you're learning how to dilate it through breath, meditation, and attention. And so there's a few different ways, because the body really follows our focus and attention. One has to do with opening the eyes, and you can even slightly do this, opening the eyes all the way wide and starting to perceive at the kind of sides, left and right, aside your temples, starting to let the light pour in and diluting the focus. So you're observing and absorbing everything, especially with the wide horizon line. That's a great technique to practice, to kind of go into omnifocus and then lean forward again and go back into specific laser focus on the one thing that's in front of you. And the same can be done through breath and dilating through, slowing down the breath. Like if you think of it, all the, if it's Navy SEALs or yogis, all the breath modalities we've known that have been passed on, or shamanic breathing, they either slow down the breath. So you go from the regular 15 breaths a minute, which is the subconscious rhythm most humans are on, 13 to 17, about 15 a minute. We can go all the way down to 3 breaths a minute. That's 10 seconds in and 10 seconds out. And when you actually do it, you're changing your whole state. You're tuning the radio receiver to a different station, right? And then singing, I mentioned the eyes and the breath now, but singing is the way we actually start resonating the human body in the space. And so just like when we express and record a podcast and we make these sound waves that are on the internet for eternity, when we're singing, something changes. We are starting to resonate. We're starting to harmonize with ourselves, with our own consciousness, right? Because we're all born singers. And maybe some of you are like, yeah, but not me. And well, humans have a voice that can sing. And that's how simple it is. You might be singing in your tone and not what other people call the scale of tones. But honestly, I think that's even better than singing in just the scale of tones. Everyone has a unique pitch. And when you hear your own pitch out loud, when you hear yourself sing mantras or kirtan or even like regular pop songs, when you hear your own voice, a kind of magic of your consciousness happens. You start realizing this is me. You start understanding that that's the frequency of you. And remember, we all hear a different voice in our head than we hear out loud when we record ourselves. And so that's where it all starts to begin being trippy, because when you start chanting the way, monks across all kinds of different belief systems chant and pray, it's like we're setting a frequency. And then, full circle here to why this topic is so fascinating for me and why I teach it, and why I teach a lot of breath work in private, coaching relationships, because I just enjoy witnessing and helping someone over like 3-4 months, changing habits on a profound level that allows the space to set your frequency and attune to who we are, because our voice ultimately is how we harmonize with the rest of the world. Even the Bible, for example, says at the beginning there was the word. Right? Like sound creates reality. As I speak, so I create. Abracadabra. And when you breathe and set the frequency, I do it first thing in the morning. A lot of the monks around the world and the yogis around the world do it at 4:30 a.m. There's a reason for that as well, and the electromagnetic polarity of the planet, but not to get lost there. Whenever you wake up, if you have the time, do it. It just changes the day you're going to have. And yeah, I don't know what's curious about that, maybe, Brandon, in terms of sound and breath. Let me check in with you. Like, how does it relate to your personal practice?
Yeah, I have found if I start my day just doing a little bit of breath work, it instantly sets the tone in a different way. And the way I kind of view it as well is like, everything is a reflection. Everything is symbolically reflecting us back to ourselves. And when you think about, how a lot of times people are breathing really, really shallow all the time, and especially if they're upset or angry or stressed, if you pay attention, there's, shallow, quick breathing sort of thing. And then alternatively, if you take deep, slow breaths, right, you can't really be upset. That's why it's, deep breaths, and that's like a reflection of how much, how much you can hold, right? And it's sort of having like big, strong, breath versus weak breath where you're not getting enough oxygen, and therefore you can't really handle the trials and tribulations of your day or life, versus, deeper breath where you're taking in, or even if it's rapid and you're taking in a lot more oxygen. Well, that's sort of, if you think of that as like your power or your chi, it just makes all the sense in the world that, give me more chi to work with, and I can navigate more gracefully through the challenges of my life.
And it relates to like what we know from like high performance athletics. Like if you run 100 meters or you're going for the world record of 100 meters, you will not need to breathe in that time. Like you're going to be running this under 10 seconds, completely anaerobic experience of the body, right? There's no extra oxygen needed. You fill up with it beforehand. Your red blood cells deliver it into the mitochondria and activate your entire system, and boom, you explode. And on the other hand, right, like one could say that who has the deepest breath in any given space is the one who, quotation marks here, controls the room, because you're having access to presence, you're having access to consciousness, you're having access to the space around us that is informing so much more than what's inside of our heads.
Yeah, powerfully said. Let's talk a little bit about your podcast and, Green Planet, Blue Planet, and your vision for the Earth, your Earth vision, and how, you see, the state of the world. And of course, as of this recording, we're still dealing with the, coronavirus issue on the planet, which is a very unique situation and trying situation that we find ourselves in, on the planet. Many people believe it is, sort of a transitionary moment, and certainly lots of challenges with it, but also I think lots of blessings in disguise. So I'm curious, what your overall take is, and then we could probably do hours of conversation on this. But high level of what your vision is of where the Earth's going, the current unique state that we're in, and how are you viewing all of this?
Well, let me begin with thanks. That's a really, really great setup and question. And my answer is definitely like we're on a cosmic journey as citizens of planet Earth. And so that means a lot of things. That for one means there is an interrelation between us and the rest of the cosmos and the universe within the multiverse. And then on our current state in 2020, I mean, it means that we're learning from a perspective of consciousness about the journey in the body. And there are a lot of things happening on this planet already. And there's a lot of, big kind of crazy experiences happening left, right, and center. And so for me, when I talk about my podcast, Green Planet, Blue Planet, on the project I've started, it's really about sense making and gathering a cohort, a hub of people that are like a planetary innovation lab. People who are called to or who showcase planetary leadership. And what I mean with that is not just leadership of power and money, even though that is also important. And some of those people I have interviewed, but really a form of leadership that comes much more from a perspective of consciousness and guiding us into the next stages of our individual and social evolution. And so part of the journey for me there is I publish between 2 and 3 episodes every week. It's on all the major platforms. There's also a website, greenplanet-blueplanet.com. I have a Facebook group with just over over 1,000 people in there. People, interacting, sharing their views. And so where we're meeting is kind of the shared mindset that, there's a lot of deception and a lot of narratives out there that, whilst we can acknowledge them and we should definitely take into account how the world is currently reacting to COVID, we have a clear direction forward, and we have a clear direction forward as free human beings on a spacecraft planet Earth. And that's why I call it the green planet, blue planet. The things that then start to matter is not being against the current systems. It's about making everything before us, from fascism to communism to capitalism to forms of inequality, obsolete based on the direction of a thriving Earth we're going to. And there are actually hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people at this point who feel this, who get this, who know this deep down in their bones. And so the picture for me is a green planet where, coming out of pollution, inhumane era, people often call it climate change. Not my favorite narrative or name, climate change, but let's just say as an antidote to, an antidote to the pollution we have in the world. We know we need to plant a lot of trees, right? Even some of our more advanced renewable energies still run out of, still based on the tree industry even. And so planting a lot of trees is for me the picture of the green planet, is the picture of us being able to plant and leave alone a lot of ancient forest, and then utilize and live with the forests that we do interact with in a very holistic way, in a way that actually allows us to build a balance to the carbon cycle of the planet. So in another way of putting it, we as a species are understanding there's a carbon cycle, an interaction between the atmosphere and all the beings, and we find our most aligned space in it, which is like a gardener, right? And then the blue planet picture is much, much clearer, much simpler. It's just we need clean waters and everyone access to those waters. Water and seed cannot be owned or monopolized theoretically it can. We've seen this, but that's just the old systems we're emerging.
Doesn't mean it should.
No, it definitely means it should not. And if somebody does it, then we need to find creative, innovative solutions to understand how we can render that obsolete. And so that's the direction I see when I speak about Earth Vision. Really, man, I was guided into this podcast journey through the meditation and listening space myself. And at some point, I just started realizing I want to ask a few questions. And so I'm in the process of writing a book about purpose and planetary purpose and what it means to be a society of purpose, where people wake up, where humans realize us being alive is the purpose. Me being here right now is the purpose. You listening to this and taking whatever insight you can get today is your purpose. You going out and building connection is part of your purpose. We're on the path. There is no not being on the path. And so as I'm developing that kind of, I would call it like a direction sign, it's a narrative. It's going to be a book. There's going to be some more scripts as well. And right now there's about 200 episodes of the podcast and a whole community of people behind it, both who have been interviewed and like it from Positive Head, all the amazing people listening and tuning in, giving their feedback, being part of the active conversation. It's this inquisitive nature, this curious nature that keeps driving me to ask the questions around trust, around garbage, around Earth Vision, around what is our shared dream for this pale blue dot in space. And the way I was guided to ask this question is very much centered around 7 generations and taking a more ancient kind of value system, like stewarding this planet for the next 7 generations, simply as a jumping off point to understand, okay, so what if we were to look at this planet in the year 2222, just to make it a nice number. Like what would we look back on? Yeah, like what did humanity build? Did we just follow the technocrats and bureaucrats into a dystopian reality of ultra wealth? Come on, I mean,
Right.
that's just such a boring story. I mean, I get it. It's been all of our media, and we've like been indoctrinated with it through TV and cinema for decades. But no, we don't really need to accept this as the single version of how this planet goes. I think because we're originating in a much more organic nature, as a human being, on this planet, we really get to choose. We don't have to put microchips into our body. We can, but I don't think that's the world I want to largely see. And so interacting responsibly with technology, and interacting also with technology in a way that is much more cosmic than um, Newtonian and machine driven, right? Because when we look at a much more cosmic picture, and we look at our Earth in the next 200 years or more, um, I don't really think we need to be drilling down into the earth, and all of the technology we currently have is derived from this plastic fusion that we've created, right? And um, yeah, I mean, I'm going to pass it back to you, but in my version of 2222, humanity has definitely established a form of contact within the universe and the multiverse. And I think this is part of why we're on this planet, is to like understand different dimensions, understand how to live in harmony with ourselves, with each other, with nature, with the animals, with the beings, and then with all the beings across the cosmos.
I love how you took it there. I recently watched Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind with Dr. Stephen Greer, and I
So
thought it
good.
was really, really well done. Yeah. And you saw it as well, right?
I just watched it last week. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so good. I definitely recommend it. And what's cool about it is he talks about like, look, contact is already here.
Yeah.
It's, and then he shows his whole protocol as to how he's been for, 20 years taking people out and doing meditation and, his whole technique to call in, UFOs essentially. And, the amount of documented video that they have of lights appearing in the sky, dancing around and doing crazy patterns and all these things. It's pretty fascinating. I mean, he's definitely, probably my favorite person in the truther, surrounding UFO, world, if you will. He's just so down to earth seeming, pun intended, and grounded and intelligent, and even that documentary is such a beautiful reflection. I think it's so not cheesy and over the top, and something that causes you to kind of roll your eyes and say, okay, this sort of discredits. In my from my perspective, he just brings a ton of credibility to the phenomenon. And of course, now we even have the military announcing, acknowledging UFOs, and once again, keyword being unidentified, not knowing what it is. But yeah, I'm. It's going to be really interesting to see where all this goes in the future and how much of
Absolutely.
it is.
I think the reason why I went there from, we're on the same wavelength here, Brandon. Like, the option is military based or organic, free beings in nature based, right? And so that's
Right.
part of why I took it there from Green Planet, Blue Planet, and the podcast, and like the Planetary Innovation Lab, and people uniting as Earth guardians or stewards to really commit and kind of create an Earth oath, that actually has been created in collaboration with Savannah House out of San Francisco, and other organizations. Because there's actually a lot of humans out there that want that kind of free planet that is really not based on any military control at all. No black ops, no special ops, no intelligence, no, but just an understanding of our interconnectivity. And like, we call it 5D in the metaphysical or esoteric narrative or phenomena. And it's a different way to attune, because it's really literally comes back to breath work and resonance. We can only form truly reliable trust relationships when we immerse into a state of heart-brain coherence, which is a certain wavelength on the frequency spectrum, and it's a certain wavelength in the breath pattern. And from that place, that's exactly where Stephen Greer takes it in this amazing documentary you mentioned, Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind. From that place of coherence, the meditative state opens, and then from that meditative state, it's almost like you're dreaming, but not entirely, right? And so a
Right.
lot more becomes possible in the physicality of our reality.
Yeah, and there's been so much of it lately, and it's gonna be a blast to just see where it goes. And one of the things that he warns against is sort of the powers that be or government entities wanting to sort of shape the narrative so that these are beings that need to be feared and whatnot. And really, it's like if there were beings that are here and visiting here, I'm sure they could have, and they're able to get here and sort of dance around our planes like it's nothing, and et cetera, and turn off nuclear weapons at military bases and all the things that have happened. I think they could have, if they wanted to destroy us, they could have a long time ago. So I think that's one of the things that he says is like, look, work on establishing contact yourself, and you don't need to wait and see what's fed to you through media and the narrative that may very well be presented to us in a way. It's like, oh, this is something to fear. We need to get aggressive and and all of these things.
Yeah, to look at that whole narrative and that whole story from the other way around, like if we as planet Earth, have a cosmic experience, then us as consciousness in the body as humans, we're given the opportunity to evolve and learn this step on our own, and partially because a lot of the extraterrestrial phenomena are in a multiple dimension space. Not everything crystallizes down back to this like really limited visible spectrum that we call 3D, right? And so,
Right.
wouldn't it make sense for us to first get the chance to figure it out by ourselves, as a planet, as a species, how to let go of deception, how to let go of intrigue, how to let go of ego, greed, and success, and redefine success into a thriving with everything. And then when you say everything, it's actually everything. Like abundance, God is omnipotent. That's why we say omni. It's because it's everything. And so that includes every
Right.
life form out there. And at that place, this idea that there's a scary life form out there, it actually collapses, right? Because a scary negative entity that could just control you and kill you because they're so advanced, well, if they exist and have that intention, then they would already be here and doing that. And
Mm-hmm.
and so that is not really happening, which should show us that we're actually given the opportunity. And well, let's bring it back from extraterrestrials into just other beings on the planet. Like look at dolphins and
Mm-hmm.
orcas and
Right.
wolves and caribous, and they're like giraffes and zebras, like whatever it is, wherever you are, or elephants. I love elephants. There is a way to connect with other beings on this place of heart-brain coherence. In this way, how horses can be healing to people because their massive heart space allows a form of softening into our way of being. And so that's really what I think Earth is going through. That's what I really think humanity is going through. And that relates to these COVID-19 and virus times and the timelines of are we being controlled, or is this natural? No matter what, like we had to react, and now how do we react? How do we build up an economy again? We're confronted with this because our ways of operating are simply, I would say, our human operating system is being upgraded, and we can choose to do so, or we can possibly skip out of it as long as we're trying. But like honestly, it's time to choose it. It's time to choose to be here and to live love and to expand our nature into this harmonious kind of almost like biomimicry nature,
Right. Absolutely. Wow, this has been such a cool. I can't believe we're already, an hour or so in. This has been such a cool conversation, Julian. I feel like you and I could keep going. Maybe we'll have to do a part 2 at some point. For people who want to continue to follow your work, obviously, Green Planet, Blue Planet. Is there any other, place or way you would like to tell them to latch on to Julian's world?
Yeah, I mean, the website is kind of like a good place to jump around and see different things I'm offering. I always love when people like actively participate in the conversation. So there's a podcast page on Facebook and a group called Green Planet, Blue Planet Podcast. Instagram is a good place too. I'm sure you're gonna tag me in the show notes. Just get closer and let's have this conversation together, because for me, really, this is like a collective experience that everyone, coming back to purpose, right? Full circle here to something we unpacked earlier. Like, you are your purpose, what you are here to share and offer. If that's being an amazing mother, if that's being a podcaster, if that's being somebody who's really fascinating, good with numbers, or if you're a body worker or an artist, like, we need everyone to be in their fullest expression. And as we're walking our way there, let's all play and be in touch, and comment and talk and connect. And hopefully, this is one of my prayers, we can move away from keyboard warriorship into a form of celebrating together how this internet and meeting each other in the physical, in the non-physical plane, in the planes of Zoom and Google and Facebook, allow us to sense make of a lot of our behaviors, and then from there somewhere, I don't know.
Yeah. To the stars, my friend, to the stars.
Back to the stars, where we came from.
Back to the stars. It's always back to the stars. So you kind of, you gave us a bit of a synchronicity story earlier, so I'll definitely let you off the hook. I don't know if you had another one that you wanted to share, a story of serendipity or positive paranormal story or anything like that, but if that was the one and you sort of just came out with it, by all means, it was a good one. So, but if you have any other...
There are so many, man. There are so many. They're every day unfolding. I mean, we could have an hour-long conversation just about that. There's a great story about how I met my beloved, my partner, actually. But right now, I'm going to share one more from this morning. I went for a run.
Okay, great. I like fresh.
Yeah, I woke up and I was like, sunshine, I got to go outside. And so I did. I went for a run, and it was maybe just a minor synchronicity to some. But I sure was blessed to be... You know how it happens? Like, you choose the route you run or you do something in, and you don't even know why. And then next thing I know, I'm in front of this coyote in Golden Gate Park here in San Francisco. And animals and wild animals have a lot of medicine and messaging kind of capacity. And, just being in the synchronous flow that nature says hi to me like that's, I think, worth a share at the end of this episode. Coyote was actually first scared of me and then kept following me because he was more curious than he was nervous. Really fun to watch.
Cool. Yeah, I just pulled up. A coyote symbolizes adaptability, new birth, enthusiasm, ingenuity, resourcefulness, illumination, fearlessness, teamwork, shape-shifting, protection, and inner being, to name a few. So
there we go.
Cool. I've had a hummingbird that keeps coming. It's coming to my room 3 times in the last week, probably. So I'm like, okay, wow. This is pretty awesome. Like, literally flying in the door and flying around my room and then back out. So it's pretty cool to get those.
That's beautiful.
Those, animals coming in, and I always want to see what is the symbology of it. So very, very cool, my friend. Well, I do have one final question for you, and it is this. In 60 seconds or less, what is the meaning of life according to Julian Guderley?
The meaning of life is to live life itself.
I think that's a common answer and a good answer.
Our purpose is to be ourselves and to fully express the I am. Yeah.
Well, you are doing it well, my friend.
Thank you, brother. Same back to you. Takes one to see one. I so enjoyed being on your show. This was a great hour. And let's keep it rolling, to be continued. We can have more of those. We can continue to. I can't wait to see more optimistic TV shows as well. You're doing so great, Brandon. Really grateful.
Yeah. It's exciting. We have it's going to be coming out on a larger platform. We'll be announcing that soon, and so I'm really excited about that. We started releasing and then kind of paused it to shift over from self-release to on YouTube to putting it on a bigger platform. So that information news coming soon. But in the meantime, people, you can go over to optimistic.tv and see the first few episodes, including with Lee Harris, who I adore, that we mentioned earlier. And perhaps you'll see Julian on a future episode. Until then, Julian, so good to chat with you, my friend, and all of you out there listening. Journey well, everyone. Love you so much. And if you're feeling the call to come for a week retreat-style Mystic Manor immersion, remember to go now and book your time to speak with me directly about stepping into the optimistic vortex at calendly.com/talk with Brandon while there are still spots left. Otherwise, I look forward to co-creating magic with you at the Mystic Manor.